a new film based on the rock opera by The Who, is a 2-hour tribute to an almost forgotten species, the mods of the early 60s. The film won't be released until the autumn, but already a mini-mod revival is underway. Like the other revival of last year, the Skinheads, these mods haven't got too much in common with their predecessors, but they think that mod is the way to look and mod bands are the right music to follow. It's not just fans of The Who, but hundreds of kids in and around London swapping their punk gear for Parkers, Fred Perry shirts and ancient scooters. But where the mod revival is really taking place is down in the clubs. Is the Chords, one of a dozen or so who are recreating the mod sound and the clean-cut way of dressing. Bands with names like the Purple Hearts, the Scooters and the Mods. But why choose the mod era to emulate? Isn't another revival just a sign that kids are hard up for ideas of their own right now? Today we're going to look at mods, both old and new, and find out what there was about the original craze that makes it so attractive to young people 15 years later. Violent, pill-popping scooter riders in button-down shirts and Parkers. That's most people's memory of mods. But the original mods, the ones who started the ball rolling as early as 1962, were a very different breed. Reasonably well off because they held down steady jobs, they worshipped clothes. What they wore made them feel superior to everyone else. Even after the mod movement spread away from its original roots, fashion remained the average mod's #1 obsession. Roy Carr, who's now a rock journalist, and Chris Reeves, a musician, both played in mod groups back in '65. They recalled how vital it was to keep up with a constantly changing fashion scene.
I mean, you could be really in with say, a jacket or a tie on Friday night. Monday night, you had to get rid of it, you know.
Well, that must have cost a lot of money.
Somewhere.
Oh, yeah, but your money went a lot further. 3 records for a quid.
They weren't so out of work in those days,
yeah. If you had 15 quid a week, you could go and buy, say, 3 records for a quid, shirt for 2 quid, go down the scene for 30 bob the whole night out and still have money for the rest of the week.
And, of course, most mods then were in relatively well-paid jobs. I mean, they were...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was the idea, to try and get yourself into some office or something, you know. God knows why, but, you know, I suppose it was to get the loot. You know,
I didn't know anybody that was on the dole. I think we must have been fortunate. It was almost subversive because you could go to work dressed in the sort of clothes that you could go and hang out in clubs and nobody would know. So that was the thing. You could hold the job down in, say, the Yorkshire Penny Bank or whatever it was and still be cool. You didn't have to, you weren't like weekend hippies.
When you were both on the road, did people look at what you were dressed at, how you were dressing? Tell me a bit about all that.
Yeah,
did the kids in the audience check you out?
Saved it.
Oh, you used to sort of... We worked mainly in the north of England because there was more money up there. I mean, you worked the marquee, you got 15 quid. I won't say how much we used to get up there, but you used to get good money.
Guess it.
So I used to go down Petticoat Lane, round here, a couple of Madras jackets, £4.75. That would do you for about 3 weeks until you just wasted them away.
Swap them round in the band and all that.
You know, and that was it. Find out what the latest Italian shoes were in. And then next week everybody in the audience would be wearing it, so you had to change. So half your money used to go on clothes, but it was fun.
Chris, tell me about how important leather coats were.
Well, I remember this guy down Brighton Promenade, somewhere like that, and he had a really amazing leather coat on, and there was about 30 of us all strolling along, and the guy who was at the front, the main man, kind of went up to him and said, "Here, give us that coat." And he said, you know, F off and all the rest of it. And like the geezer just pulled out his pistol and just started blasting away with it. He'd rather do that than part with this thing, you know, like a complete nutter. You know, I mean, people were like, it was like to own the heavens if you had an amazing leather or suede coat, you know.
I'm gonna wait till the midnight hour. It wasn't long before music became second only in importance to clothes as far as most mods were concerned. But the music they listened to in the early days wasn't the hard-edged rock of bands like The Who and the Small Faces. They bought imported records like early Jamaican reggae or blue beat and American soul, especially for their dances like the block and the slide. The demands for transatlantic soul were such that British bands were forced to serve up a steady diet of cover versions, as Roy Carr, ex-member of the Executives, and Chris Reeves, one-time Diac, recalled.
Like with me, the band I had, we had problems because we'd go out and say play Motown, Tamla, whatever, but the A&R men would say you've got to write your own material. You couldn't write. You couldn't. You were just hamstrung, so you used to forget the records and just go out and rely on live work. And there were so many bands working, making good money, drawing crowds, and they couldn't sell more than 1,000 records.
Well, we used to do stuff like Respect and things like that. In the band that I was in, it was like, they always used to go down better than your own songs. Yeah. People weren't interested in that in those days.
They used to ask you not to play.
Yeah, right. Just get on with it, you know.
But two young mod bands of the time did break away from covering other people's material, The Who and the Small Faces. They created a new style of aggressive R&B which influenced much later rock. Can you remember what you thought about The Who and the Small Faces? Back in 64, 65?
Just like bouncing up and down, all the aggression and everything.
I never talked to anybody for a week after I saw them. I mean, they just completely wiped me out.
Yeah, me too.
And then what happened, I saw them one week, and then the next week we had to play with them, and I mean, I just didn't want to go on and play with them. I mean, how could you play before The Who? And then the week after that, we played with the Small Faces and Georgie Fame, and I was really depressed.
I saw the Small Faces in the Gun, actually, in Croydon, this little tavern, and I saw them sort of lining up all these tables in front of the stage, and I thought, what the hell's all that about? They were putting the mic stands on there, and I suddenly realised they were putting these enormous, great big boxes up behind it, which turned out to be these Marshall amplifiers. I'd never seen in my life before, you know. And they nearly tore the roof off the place, you know. Before then, everyone was using little sort of biscuit tins.